Don't know that.
So, y'all, don't y'all, I know y'all glad to see each other. Don't y'all fight today?
No, y'all don't fight today.
Yeah.
Wait until after 12 and y'all fight all day.
No, I'm only here about 20 minutes to 12. I gotta go to the airport.
Oh.
Yeah, Molly could fly in. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You know what? Okay. I guess nobody gonna think I'm on the phone, right? Anyway, last week we were talking about Jesus. Okay. We were talking about.
On mute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay, darling. Good morning. We were talking about a couple of things. We were talking about primarily Jesus and how what his life meant in reference to the cross. There are a couple of things this morning that I wanted to look at. One of I don't know, it may segue into one the other, and it may be so different until they don't connect at all. One deals with the current awareness of how different females are treated in this earth and in the workplace, primarily, and how and the other one deals with the actual death of Jesus on the cross. Okay, so where do we start? We start with Bess and her grands. Good morning. So where do we start this morning? Rainier, take yourself off mute and raise the question, dear.
Okay, so my question was about how women are kind of, we talk about equality and equality in the workforce, and companies seem to be just fine having women in the workforce at lower levels. But when women try to move into the upper ranks, they're often, and so especially if they have children or especially young children, I'm finding there's a sense that they can't handle that work, that type of job if they have kids. Whereas if it was a man, they're often given a raise if they have young kids. So it seems to be very unequal.
Okay. I think that based on what you said and what is actually is really happy everybody knows that. I think the approach to it is wrong, and it will never be rectified as long as we see it as being unequal. The reason is because there is no equality among men when you talk about what equal actually means. It speaks more to an imbalance than it does to being unequal. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Even if the reason I say that is because we have a tendency to equate equality to pay.
Mm.
You can make the same amount of money and still not be treated equally.
It's true.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
As we see equal. But it speaks more to an imbalance that's in the other realm that is being manifested in this realm. And that imbalance is more pronounced in the workplace for a reason. If we are ever to bring things into balance, we must know what's out of balance. And in our society, the best way to to show or to get people's attention when it comes to an imbalance is to do it in a materialistic way, that it manifests in a materialistic way. In America, that materialistic manner is money. If it manifests with money, it will get somebody's attention. We might identify it wrong, we may define it wrong, but it's there for us to see, so that when we get to a place of significant awareness of who we are, we can begin to recognize it for what it really is. Does that make sense, Rainy? I got to give a chance to unmute.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we bring it into balance? How do we deal with it right now? Because I think we already know the origin of it. And we also need to look at the source of it. The source of it is the male, and the recipient of it is the female. Therefore, if things are to be brought into balance with the female, it's going to have to come from the male. In other words, it has to come from the male, because the male is the perpetuator of it. And one way to force that is for women to stop accepting it, to stop taking it, to resist it. And with that resistance comes not only comes a determination to change it. And I will offer you an example. We often talk about the women's suffrage. When women got the right to vote, they did not get the right to vote because men were kind. They got the right to vote because women stopped sleeping with them. Mm-hmm. They stopped washing. They stopped cooking. They put pressure on the men to change. If you read the history of the suffrage movement, there was a huge push to let men, well, if we can't vote, we can't do anything else. And that put the pressure on men to do it. But women were better organized during that period. Now, there is no significant organizational structure that's pushing for the balance in the workplace. The reason it isn't is because of greed. Everyone is in it for themselves, and they're afraid that they're going to lose something. And the structure, the economic structure of the society was done this way purposely. Because there was a time when people, it did not matter if they lost their job, it did not matter if they had to struggle to make it, they still stood for something. But now, it is more of a, I got to protect myself. I have to protect my family, I have to protect our job, that kind of thing. And as a result of that, we have this strong manifestation of what we call equality, but it's actually imbalance. Now, when males began to take a role, a prominent role in facing this imbalance, and with a determination to change it, it will begin to change. I do not see this imbalance any differently than I see racism. That's also an imbalance, as opposed to being unequal. So I think that we need to begin looking at it for what it really is if we are to ever experience a significant change. And what we're speaking of is what is called the inequality in the workplace between males and females, and how in corporate America especially, females are treated unequal, not treated as equals to males. And the contention is that it has nothing to do with equality, but it has everything to do with imbalance. So, are there any questions about it so far?
Well, I kind of have an observation, which is I'm not talking to this about someone else, a girl that I know, and she said it's almost like when people make these assumptions about what a woman wants to do. You know, oh, she's going to want to, you know, not work as much because she has kids, or she's going to want to go somewhere else because she just finished her degree. They remove the choice of a person to say that, you know. And I was telling her I'd rather someone keep me loaded with work the way I've always been and let me go, hey, that's too much, than for them to assume I don't want it and try to push me into doing something else.
And see, that assumption, as you said, pertains to females, but men think the same way. But men, well, it's a man's world. In other words, men are the manipulators of this earth. So even though they think the same way, they don't respond to each other the same way. They communicate with each other more so than they will with a female. And just like there are racist dog whistles, there are also sexist dog whistles. Like, for example, I know that you are pregnant and that you probably are going to need some time off. So when you take we want you to work up until that period. Then when she does that and goes back to work, well, you were not here, so we gave part of your workload to so-and-so. And then further on down the road, well, we're going to downsize, and we may need to move you to another department, or we may eliminate your position altogether. That's walking the line on discharging someone based upon their gender without really saying it. That's a dog whistle. And women know what's being said, but they also know if they go to HR, it's not going to go into place because they didn't actually bring it out. So the desire to bring that to a screeching halt or to change that has to be predicated, has to originate from the male's desire to change it, because the male is the perpetuator. And until the heart or the consciousness of the perpetuator is changed, the recipients are going to be continuously, for lack of a better term, discriminated against or manipulated. And this did not begin with corporate America, by the way. If you read the book of Mary Magdalene, you will find that that Peter had a problem with Mary being a teacher and being female. So this it started long before this, and the difference is that when Peter made the statement, he was chastised by the other disciples, but we don't find that chastisement with people who have the ability or have the authority to make those changes. We don't find that now. And again, when the female gets to a place where they're sick and tired of being sick and tired and resist it, then it's going to prick the consciousness of the male to the extent that it's going to adversely affect him. People do not change unless they are pushed in a corner to change. They change with lip service, but their actions don't reflect the lip service unless they're pushed in the corner. And a lot of times, they are so accustomed to doing things a certain way, even though their lip service change, it's almost like muscle memory. They continue the same thing because they're not challenged at every turn with that. If they're challenged with that, that's when things begin to actually, the change rather, actually becomes a manifested event. Any questions about that? And you can take everything that I've said and connect it to racism.
That was my question. How does that compare to racism?
It's the same. The same energy that racism, sexism, I don't like the word homophobia because I'm not afraid of homosexuals. Phobia is a fear of something. The discrimination against homosexuals or lesbians, all this energy is the same.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we said that For racism to change, it would be
Perpetuate.
it would have to be the victims who have to help that change come about, right?
By resisting.
By resisting it. So in the case of male-female gender stuff, it's gotta be the males who make the
If
change?
women have to resist it, when the one who racism is perpetuated against has to resist the racism.
Mhm.
When that resistance takes place, it begins to hit that male at home in his pocket. Financially, that's the only reason things change with the civil rights movement, women's suffrage. The reason things changed because women stopped doing stuff at home.
Mhm.
So they began to resist. And when you resist it, that's when consciousness began to be pricked. That's when consciousness began to change. So all of the energies are the same. Like, I think it was last week, maybe the week before last, when we were talking about the energy that's driving ISIS is the same energy that drove the Catholic Church in the 16th century.
Mhm.
Same energy. No one brought it back into balance, therefore it surfaces again. And if you look at the tactics and if you look at the brutality of it, it's the same. The only difference is one is Islam and the other one was Catholicism or quote unquote Christianity. But the energy is the same. So unless when I talk about the energy, for those who may not understand what I'm talking about, unless we change the consciousness or challenge the level of awareness to bring balance, then that type of energy remains in the earth. It has to be changed. It has to be brought into check. It's almost like, well, not almost, it is like the flowing of a river. That river is going to continue to flow in the direction that it flows until you redirect it. And once you redirect it, then that's the way it will flow. But until that point, it's going to continue to flow in the direction that it flows in. Energy is going to continue to flow the way that it flows until it is changed. That is the reason a woman who is abused by a male continues to end up with males who abuse her until she changes her consciousness. And when she changes her consciousness, she begins to recognize immediately the abuse, and she does not overlook it as she has done in the past. She said, no, I'm done. I'm not going down this road again. Does that make sense?
That's like that law of thermodynamics, I think. The object at rest will stay at rest unless acted on by equal and opposite force.
Yes.
Object in motion tends to stay in motion. I'm sorry, Newton's law. Object in motion will stay in motion until acted on by equal and opposite force.
Same principle. Same principle.
Yeah.
Energy is energy, period. and it remains a neutral source until it's acted on. It does not choose to do anything. We choose how we're going to use it. We choose how we're going to use it. It doesn't matter whether it's combustible engine, combustible energy from gasoline, or whether it is energy that is created through a dam creating electricity in some huge generator. Energy is energy, and if it's not, it will only flow in the way that we direct it. It's almost like when we talk about when you shift your focus, then things in your life will change. That's just shifting the energy. You live in your own little world, and when you begin to take into consideration other people, then you will be a better person, because you will understand that the world does not revolve around you. We're talking about changing your thoughts, which is also what? Energy. So by talking about it, by speaking to this thing, the reason we are able to bring about such a resistance until it manifests as change is because if you look at very carefully what the scripture talks about, in terms of creating things, it was created by speaking. And if all the other stuff in the universe was spoken into being, then by virtue of our speaking it, it helps to put it in the macro so it can become a part of the micro. And I don't mean speaking into being a car. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those things that are going to benefit mankind. Because if you look at creation itself, you will see that all of those things that were created are things that are shared by the whole of humanity. It's nothing that was created that was created just for an individual person. Everything is for it's a shared thing. You understand?
Yes.
So that's where we are now in the process of dealing with dealing with an opportunity rather to share the desire for this to be different. And what happened when we began talking about that from the racist perspective of racism, what did we end up doing? We began to see the scale pull off. We see racism everywhere now. Everywhere. I mean, in every aspect of we see it surfacing. You cannot cut the head off the serpent unless it surfaces. You have to see what you're dealing with. So I do expect this whole thing about feminism to begin to do the same thing, to surface in the same way. And to the untrained spiritualist who's not able to read the signs of the times, they see things as getting worse. But to the one who's able to read the signs of the times, sees things as getting better. Because it's always the darkest before the dawn.
As an analogy with what you just said, it's the same exact thing about the female who is talking to this male and she keeps getting abused. It's when this thing surfaces that has become conscious to her, something that she may not have been aware of and has been like below the surface the entire time. But as soon as she recognizes in her thoughts and her actions, etc., then she can address it and move forward there. And that's both for the perpetrator and the person who is actually being subjected to the treatment. So both males and females universally have that opportunity to see what's going on and address it.
And that's exactly what's happened with the racism thing. When you look at it, the resistance to it is pricking the consciousness of the perpetuators and the children of the perpetuators, and that is the reason they're joining in the effort to bring it into it, or to bring balance to it.
And naturally, with it having to be redirected, is automatically going to be an effort not to change. That is only natural, so to speak, especially when there's already fear for something. Fear being the bottom line of what's going on. So in a weird, strange way, it's not supposed to just automatically just flip and turn, because if something just flips and turns in an extremely easy manner, then nothing's actually taking place to begin with. It's a facade.
It's not reordered.
Yeah.
Like the civil rights movement, when the legislation was signed, it was seen as though it was an automatic flip to integration. Everything, all the problems are solved when nothing really changed. The only thing changed is that you don't go to the back door, you go to the front door. And that in itself is a scale. It's not a healing.
That's just taking care of something over the surface,
right,
raking the leaves off of something, but everything that's underlying the entire structure is exactly the same. And so the thing you have is you have a little stagnation where things go on seemingly to have changed, and then when it finally surfaces again, it's larger than it was to begin with. Like
racism, now racism is a verb. Race is not the issue. Racism is the issue. That's the action. You see what I'm talking about?
And what I'm saying about...
Go ahead. Raina?
No, just as you're talking, the question I have is the same apply to poor and wealthy? Because, you know, I mean, people have been talking about the 99%, and as we're talking, it seems some of these, you know, apply there too.
Same energy.
It's all of it's the same energy, but then you actually have people who even like in the 1% or even males who are in corporate America in very high positions, you have people who are part of the problem who first begin to see that something is wrong as well. And so that energy that is very, very strong and that is causing the imbalance, it in itself starts to break up as well and splinter. So that's why you have the 1% talking out. Like when we talk, what we're talking about now with racism, you start having people in very powerful positions who may have historically been extremely racist and done terrible things, and then all of a sudden they start to say, talk up and say things are wrong, it shouldn't be this way, etc. So it's natural for it to take place that way. But I'm also bringing up the reason why things may seem or look negative on the surface, so that they're not interpreted that way. So it's almost like you determine now those things that actually happen are good when you see them happening.
And if I think we talked about this as well last week, if we look at the 99% versus 1% female and male, the races, all these things come from the same energy, but if we try to deal with them as though there's something separate, then that in itself creates more confusion. And you're putting out fires constantly, as opposed to recognizing that the source of the fire is the same. And when you extinguish it at its source, then all of these other things take care of each other. Because if we were to bring balance to this realm, then no one would be looking at a woman's side eye because she's pregnant and dealing with her on the job in a negative way or differently than they would a male. If we bring things into balance, then there would be compassion from the 1% for the 99%. If we bring things into balance, then there would be an understanding that we are the same instead of races saying we're different. Okay. So if we look at these things and see that they all of them stem from the same source, and we begin to deal with them at the source, that is when they begin to come into balance. Janice?
You know, if dads would go home with their pregnant wives, it would be more what?
Like the women's suffrage movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one small way, and I think about like how, and I don't know if all new fathers would consider it sacrifice to go to work, but I think that there's, oh God, I don't know how to say it. They lose out by not being there and by going to work. And, you know, if there would be less discrimination or at least less of a stigmatism if when the baby was born, both parents went home.
Right. Well, if both parents went home, then that would definitely bring it into it. And it doesn't have to be there for that to happen as much as the demand is there from that male. Because we constantly say it, especially to males. You're going to work so much until you miss out on your child's life. They're going to be grown and gone before you realize what you're missing. Yeah, and that happens because of 99% of the time, work. And we got you. We have a tendency to call it work, but it's actually greed, because we could live with a lot less if we chose to. And what we're actually doing is choosing the material over the family, when we could actually live with a lot less if we chose to. Because I'm a firm believer in that. Well, I'll just tell you what happened. I chose the family over work because I had I was going to the management training at EPA, and I chose to leave that to come to South Carolina because I did not want to put my kids in that environment. I did not want to be in such an environment where work was all I knew. And as a result of that, I ended up giving up a management training program for a position in a cotton mill. working for a man who could not even read or write his own name. You see? Now, did I realize at the totality of that at the time? No, I didn't. Not at all. But retrospectively, I can see the value in it. But, and I would tell you, quite frankly, what drove that. The thing that drove that is that I love my uncles. They taught me a lot. The Marcus taught me a lot. But my daddy, my daddy was not there. And I was going to make sure that I was there for my kids. You know what I'm saying? In every way possible. And not because of work, anything else was going to take me away from them. Nothing was going to take me away from them. Not even a divorce was going to take me away from my kids. So okay, Phoebe be looking for me because I've been snatching me wrong. Now,
I would like for people to change because they have a heart to do it. And then we make the statement all the time, when you put in a place, a rock in a hard place, then that's when people change. But sometimes I wish that men could go through the pains that women go through as far as with the pregnancy. I wish y'all bodies would feel what we felt when we went through the pregnancy, and just to get a touch of that, just a little feel of what's.
but see,
I'm just telling you, I'm just putting it out there.
and that's not going to happen.
I know.
And therefore,
Just a statement.
It's like, I mean, but there are some symptoms that are experienced because I had cravings.
I ain't talking about cravings now.
I'm talking about the pain.
Okay.
I don't want the pain. I do not want the pain.
What Bessie just said.
You understand that?
We need kidney stones.
I don't want the pain, and I've seen people with kidney stones, and I know what it takes to avoid them, and I do everything I can to make sure I don't have a baby called a kidney stone.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I know what I experienced when Malik was born. Phoebe was holding my hand. She almost broke my hand, had my ring on it, and oh my God! And I'm thinking she in more pain than you are. You definitely don't want that, but that's not going to happen. Now, but what needs to happen is for us to recognize, and I don't mean this in a negative way, our role. And I don't mean role that, I'm talking about our natural biological positions in this earth. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about roles in terms of this manifestation of jobs and that kind of thing.
Right.
That's crazy. I'm not talking about that at all.
Right.
Okay. The suggestion that Janice put out there, we're probably working 2 weeks.
I mean, it's not going to solve sexism in the workplace, but it would deal with that issue of, oh, you're pregnant.
It'll
you're
bring
gonna
it to
be
the
gone.
surface though.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll make it more prominent. And see, again, just because, if someone changes because it's affecting the bottom line, that doesn't mean they changed.
Right.
Because the bottom line was affected during boycotts. And it didn't change racism. Only thing it changed was, okay, since you're not going to come here to eat, then I'm going to let you come in the front door so I won't get boycotted. That was the bottom line. The whole civil rights change had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with economics. That's the only thing changed.
There has to be a genuine change where there's a better connection between both people that are actually involved, not just one individual preventing something from happening to them, like some type of punishment, so to speak. With what you mentioned with the guys going home, all of a sudden put in that situation is a better understanding, and there's a change in their heart, there's a change between the connection and even that entire family structure as well. So there's definitely a lot that takes place that actually changes below the surface, not just I'm avoiding some type of punishment or this gives me the best reward type thing.
Any other questions or statements about that?
So we as women have to make the proclamation. Enough.
Resisting.
Yeah. That I'm just. This is it. You know.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Well,
And
I mean, the French, I've just been sitting here musing, it's going to come from way out in left field as sometimes. French have had a folk saying for generations that all politics starts in the bedroom. And if you just play with that, and get past any of the physical aspects, get into the fundamental nature of a being, masculine and feminine, where I go with that is, then what is politics? Politics is the gap between the harmony, the balance of those two energies, masculine and feminine. That's why we need politics, because we have the gap. We wouldn't have to have politics, we wouldn't have to negotiate things if we understood ourselves, each other, etc., more wholly and fully, which is, I think, what the foundation's all about. Okay? So that's just giving you an understanding, so that's why that expression is funny on one level, but profound on another to me. And it all extrapolates out from that. It's all about the gap. And then if you have anything, the best that politics can do is try to control and manage behavior so that it buys time for people. But here's where I think as a culture we've really fallen off the edge. We don't understand that the only way you have things like civil rights laws and maybe the change is you have an education process that goes with it, so people learn, not just by direct experience, but by the experience of others, how to be free of that misunderstanding or whatever you want to call it. If you don't have that, then all you have is a bunch of laws that are in effect until you have a new generation that doesn't remember why they're there and changes them, which is what's going on now too, in my view. In other words, you know what I'm trying to say? And I don't even mean education in school, which is part of it, but education in all senses of the term. Because we seem to think we're the only culture on the planet. There are just other places that do bits and pieces of this much better. They don't have to escape from the same sort of tradition that we bind ourselves with. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And how else do you do that between education? What are we doing in here that's an educated thing? But anyway, it's all, to me, it seems to come down to that misunderstanding, as Pastor just said, or earlier said, of, for want of a better term, the roles, or what is feminine, what is masculine, within the being. Not, at some point it starts between a man and a woman, but it goes inside. We've said that a lot. So, anyway. But, anyway.
And when we think about it, what
Story
Richard just said, we are not the only society. But as we look around the world, we see the same issues. Some are manifested in a greater way in certain places, but the issues are primarily the same, which means that they come from the same roots. And I do believe that one of the reasons, if not the major reason, that this nation was allowed to come into existence is because of the day that's here now. And that day meaning there is such a diverse society, this is such a diverse population, until we have access to all the energies on earth in this nation. And I believe that it is incumbent upon us to change things. The energy to change the world was usurped by greedy men. Think about it. If things are manifested, then let's say, for example, that the founding perpetuators of genocide, because they sure weren't fathers. If their efforts had been put into a spiritual movement to alter the course of the earth in terms of energy, in terms of life, how different would this be? Because what happened, this country controlled and controls the thing that people see of importance in this earth, economics. Suppose it was spiritual. And I'm saying that that's where I believe that that's where we're headed, to a spiritual change. Because the energies that have been brought together here have the ability, if not the awareness, to make the change at the root of it all. And the root of it all seems to be right here.
Right where?
Here in America. We have the ability to destroy everything in this earth or to save it. And we are the ones who manipulate the economic system, we manipulate racism, sexism, the whole 9 yards. We're the ones. And regardless of what is said about what's going on with ISIS, if it had not been for a Cheney and a Bush, things would be quite different in that part of the world. But it had to take place in order for that type of energy to be dealt with. It has never been even, honestly, prior to ISIS, it was not even discussed until people who are getting castigated for saying it say it's no different than what happened with the Crusade. But that was the 16th century. So they want to go back to the 16th. It doesn't matter. It happened. And they're doing the same thing. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody in school wanted to teach it. That was not a part of history. You know, it was like one page. The Crusades took place, and they were made to look like they were saviors of the world as opposed to murderers. That energy is still in the earth, and it has to be dealt with. That's all I'm saying. The root of it has to be dealt with. And guess what? Apparently, it has to be dealt with here in this country, in this society, because it was this society that brought it back to the surface. This society brought it to the surface. This society went into the china shop and became a bull and broke a rock. And breaking the rock broke everything in the area. This society did it. It is Netanyahu had to speak to the Congress. He had to do that. Netanyahu had to win. He had to do that. What he did by speaking to the Congress was create a confederacy between the racism in this country and in Israel. Those two things were conflated when he did that. And the one who is protective of racist attitudes is going to Israel to speak. Well, it had to take place that way. Boner.
Boehner going?
Yeah, it had to take place that way. In order for these things, for this attitude of change to be injected into that part of the world.
Wow.
And that injection comes from those who are covered by their government. We have opportunity to be the seed of change. And the womb at the same time. Because see, when a seed is no good without a womb. And up until the reason things were so awful when the society was established is because there was no womb. There were only seeds. How many females were involved in the writing of the documents that govern this nation. Zero. There was no womb. It was always a seed. And wherever you have all seed in the womb, there's no life. And if you look at the documents that were perpetuated, they were a justification for ending life for certain people who challenged the authority. And those documents are still in place to this day. And those documents changed absolutely nothing. Nothing. Those documents did not end slavery. Those documents changed nothing. It was important that the document codified the African as being 3/5 of a man. That was important. It had to be done that way.
Yeah.
If you're not pressured, you don't fight for change.
Even that fraction is somehow,
Yeah.
it's so thoughtful and deliberately insulting.
Yes.
They didn't just pick a half or a quarter or something easy. They were like, no, you're just a little bit more than half a man. Yeah, that seems about right.
Well, and they didn't even do it on the basis of humanity.
Oh, that was financial transaction?
Well, what
That
happened?
number?
You remember how it came into being?
No.
Yes.
What happened when the Constitution was being structured? There was supposed to only be a Senate, and the Southerners said that it was not fair
Right.
because some of the states had the equal representation but less people. So they wanted to increase the number of senators per state. So the compromise was a House of Representatives. When they did the House of Representatives, again, they said it was not fair because the northern states was going to have more representatives. So the compromise was they could count the slaves as 3/5 of a vote of a person when they apportioned the district for the House of Representatives. That's where it came from.
Wow.
So we wouldn't have had that if there hadn't been an argument over representation.
We were 0 of a man. We became 3/5 because they wanted to vote. That's
Dang.
but that's
Forgot
reality.
about that. Yeah.
So you could
And
have
we
been a
still
court.
didn't get to vote,
You could
not
have been a
even
court.
every other time.
That's right, exactly.
But see, it wasn't for us to vote. It was for us to count so that
The
they
same
could have the
economic-
representation in the district.
It's the same, like thing you were saying a while ago about the economic reasoning for, with the boycotts or whatever, with them adhering to the different demands, it was only because it was economic.
Right. And look at Georgia. That's why Georgia has so many small counties. Because they were counting plantations as counties.
Jeez.
That's why they have so many small counties in Georgia.
You didn't learn that in school?
The 3/5 part? I did. It was 8th grade.
So,
You didn't learn that.
I had a black South Carolina history
Oh,
teacher.
okay.
We covered some stuff.
some real stuff. Yeah. So but anyway, that's how it came into being. Now keep this in mind also, that females were not even counted. They were counted for districting, but they were not counted. They couldn't even vote. They had no say so whatsoever. Again, nothing but seeds. When you have nothing but seed, the seed does not have anything to nurture it, so it does what? It dies. So there's no life. And if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, that's exactly what's happening. So it's imperative that we begin to recognize things as they are and stop sweeping stuff under the rug, stop playing games with it, and stop being afraid to speak of it. Even though it may not come out right, if we discuss it long enough, we can get a clarity. You will get some clarity about it. So, any other questions? Hi, Barbara.
Hey.
Any other questions?
No, it just occurred to me and I know it's stating the obvious, and we've said it already, that it is exactly the same. The men who had money made the decisions about what the foundation of the government would be, and it's the same men with money who control all of the politics and the power now.
Well, okay, let's look at that. If you did not have property, you couldn't vote.
Exactly.
Because was it Thomas Jefferson who said that we must have an educated electorate? And if you didn't have money, you didn't vote. Guess what? This has been the same thing that happened at the foundation of this society. Make up your mind. The same thing that happened at the foundation of this society is taking place right now. This government is being bought
Yes.
by those who have money, just like it was bought by those who had money at the foundation of it. Everything is reverting to what it was from the beginning. You say, well, we're not slaves. Yes, we are. Yes. There are lynchings. They just lynch with pistols. With bullets. I mean, think about it this way. Here we are. To show you how arrogant the racists are, there's this thing in Fort Lauderdale with these racist emails and this little racist movie that they did with a black police chief. The police chief is black. And Fort Lauderdale, and they produced this little Klan N-word movie for the consumption of this small group of policemen, and they sent back and forth emails concerning us, and somebody told it, and when they looked into their emails and saw the movie, they saw how racist it was, and I think it was 4 or 5, and one of them had a last name Alvarez.
What was the last name?
Alvarez.
Yeah. And do you think you got that far gone? Because you can cut grass. I mean, come on now, don't be.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow.
So the same things are happening, but we cannot respond to them the same way.
Right.
We have to respond to them in a way that's going to change it and not cover it up. The response must be definitive this time. It has to be. It cannot be a temporary fix. And I don't believe that all of these things are taking place at one time if there is not a definitive fix for them. If the people were not in the earth to handle them, they would not be surfacing now. Never has all of them surfaced at the same time. Never. Ever has all of them surfaced at the same time. So all of them are surfacing at the same time. And rather than being like the ostrich, sticking our heads in the sand so somebody can kick our butt and you don't know who's doing it, we need to take our heads out of the sand and take responsibility and do what we are in this earth to do. Our responsibility must be taken seriously. We can't play with it anymore. We cannot vacillate anymore. This is too serious. And I do believe that the we of whom I speak are in this room and on Skype and on the phone. I believe that's the we of whom we speak. We cannot wait for someone else to do it any more than we can wait for someone else to feed us. We cannot wait. If we don't do it, it will not be done. And every one of us know that there is a responsibility, there is a burden there on our shoulders to do this. And we must do it, accept it, and move forward. If we were not capable of doing it, it would never have been thrust upon us. No. And I purposely use the word burden. Because if we are not the burden bearers for the whole of humanity, then we're not taking seriously our responsibility. It is a burden. It is a heavy load. It does seem, when we look at it with our eyes, impossible. But when we see it with our eye, we know that we are more than conquerors. And it's not just, hallelujah, we more than conquerors, run down the aisle and bring me $100, $65 million jet. Well, I'm not talking about more than conquerors. That way. I'm talking about for real, for real. One of the things we have to conquer is the attitude of a $65 million jet. You know, so we have to accept that. Now, when we accept this, we put ourselves on the firing line. And this is the segue into the other thing I want to talk about. When we accept the responsibility of what we've spoken of today, we put ourselves on the firing line. We have a target on us. And if we lose sight of who we are killed in the process. Jesus said, there are those among you who will not taste death. Didn't he say that?
Yeah.
This is what I believe he was talking about. The other week, about 2 weeks ago, we were talking, Shelley and I were talking about some stuff concerning the cross, and one of the things he brought up was the idea that Jesus did not die on the cross, it was someone else. And I had read that, and my response to that was, we need to look into some research to see so we could understand it better before we began talking about it. And excuse me, I was reading the book of Genesis, the book of Judas, Judas Iscariot. I was reading the book of Judas, and I read a passage that said that what Jesus says to Judas, and I paraphrase it, and it's probably awfully awful, but the concept is that Judas is going to turn, you will turn this man, this body, over to be crucified. And but the underlying concept was that the essence of his awareness of who he is would have already left the body.
Okay.
If it had not, the body could not have died, because it had the total essence of Elohim in terms of awareness. When Jesus said, no one takes my life, I lay it down.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying, at that time, I leave this body with just enough life for you to take it. In other words, I'm giving you this body to be killed.
Right.
So the essence, the true essence was already gone. So there will be those of you who will not taste death. His messianic nature, his messianic essence was separated from the body when the body was crucified. That's the essence of what was being said when he said he wasn't. Because you cannot kill Elohim. If Paul's awareness was strong enough for him to be brought back to bring life or bring himself back to life, when he was laid on the dung heap and taken for dead, then what about Yeshua being able to do this? When the same God that allowed this death to take place is the one who resurrected him. In other words, Elohim allowed the resurrection, the crucifixion to take place, and Elohim stepped back into the body and brought it back to life, so that men would understand that death is not the end of anything, but the beginning of everything. Does that make sense? Now, I said all that to say, when we truly embrace the essence of our being, we do not mind a target being on us, because no one can take this life. We have made a conscious decision to lay it down. Whatever it takes to bring humanity to a place of awareness, or bring humanity to its senses to realize that it's not human, it is Elohim. Whatever it takes to do that, we must be willing to be positioned to do it. We cannot put ourselves in the position. We must be positioned. You understand what I'm saying by that? Because if we knew the position we needed to be in, we already be there. And we probably mess it up. Right. So we have to allow ourselves, by virtue of following the dictates of the other world, to be positioned. And once we know we are positioned to do that, then we must overcome all fears, overcome all impediments that are put in our way. And the impediments that have been put in our way are these religious beliefs that has kept us in bondage. We have to rise above them in order for us to experience the true essence of our being. If we don't rise above them, we will never experience that true essence. We talk about one to be as he was in the earth. We talk about doing what he did in greater things. We talk about all of these things. Yet, when opportunity is presented to us to rise above the nature of this earthly manifested being, we make excuses. We are afraid to do it because we don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be excommunicated from a church, or we don't want our friends to walk away from us. We don't want our family to be upset with us. You know, all kinds of excuses to do it. And I'm not talking about going to work trying to bring folk to Jesus. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Because you go get fired, and you should. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm not talking about going into work or going into social events, challenging people's beliefs. That's not what I'm talking about. Right. Challenge yourself.
Right.
Deal with it. You deal with it. And if you deal with it, it will be no difference within yourself, that is. And it will be no different than people coming to you out of the blue, asking you questions, or getting direction from you, or trying to understand things. You didn't send for them. You drew them. And that will continue to happen, so you don't have to do that. See, rather than trying to lead folk to Jesus, let them come to Jesus. You know, we talk about we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting today. And all that means is we're going to lay it all out there. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So that we have to be accepted of the positions that we have been placed in, and being accepted of these positions, they don't always look pretty. They don't always feel good. But they will always be one thing, if nothing else. Guess what that one thing is?